The champagne flute trembled slightly in my hand as Marcus leaned toward the cluster of men in charcoal suits, his voice dropping to what he thought was a conspiratorial whisper. But I heard every word. German was my first language, after all. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Sie ist süß, aber nicht besonders klug, he said with a casual shrug. She's sweet, but not particularly smart. Sobald die Finanzierung durch ist, werde ich aufsteigen. Once the financing goes through, I'll trade up. The men laughed, polite, uncomfortable laughs that told me they weren't sure how to respond to my fiancé discussing me like a stock portfolio. Marcus continued. Emboldened by the Dom Pérignon I'd ordered for this investor dinner. The same Dom Pérignon that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Die Familie hat das Geld, nicht sie. Dummes Mädchen denkt, sie hilft mir. The family has the money, not her. Stupid girl thinks she's helping me. I took a slow sip of sparkling water, my face carefully composed into the slightly vacant smile I'd perfected over the past 8 months. The smile of someone who didn't understand the conversation swirling around her. The smile of Marcus Bennett's beautiful but simple American fiancée, Elena. Except my name wasn't really Elena. Not entirely. I was Elena Magdalena von Hoffmann-Strauss, and the 4 German investors Marcus was courting so desperately, the ones he needed to save his floundering tech startup. They weren't just considering pulling their funding. They were waiting for my signal, because 3 of them were my uncles, and the 4th was my godfather. Elena Liebling, Marcus called across the private dining room of Rousseau, the city's most exclusive French restaurant. He'd insisted on booking it, despite the cost. Despite the fact that his company, Nextstream Technologies, was hemorrhaging cash. He wanted to impress the Germans. More wine for our guests? I rose gracefully, smoothing down the Valentino dress he'd asked me to wear. The red one. Men like to see a woman in red, he'd told me that morning. It shows confidence we don't actually need you to have. That comment should have been my first clue, but I'd already had dozens of clues by then. I'd just been collecting them, like pressed flowers in a book, waiting for the right moment. Of course, I said in English, my accent carefully American despite growing up in Munich and Geneva. I moved around the table, refilling glasses with practiced ease. When I reached my Uncle Friedrich, his eyes met mine for just a fraction of a second. The corner of his mouth twitched. My family was enjoying this theater perhaps a bit too much. Miss Elena, said Werner Schmidt, my godfather and the CEO of Schmidt Industrial Holdings. Your fiancé tells us you work in, what was it? Event planning? Party planning, actually, Marcus interjected before I could respond, his tone just condescending enough to sting. Small stuff, corporate gatherings, birthday parties. Keeps her busy. He smiled at me, the same smile that had charmed me 6 months ago at that business conference in Boston, before I knew what lay beneath it. How lovely, Werner replied, his expression perfectly neutral. Werner, who had attended my graduation from Harvard Business School. Werner, who had watched me present my thesis on strategic market manipulation in emerging tech sectors. Werner, who now sat across from the man I was about to systematically dismantle. The work Elena does is important, I said quietly, maintaining character. It makes people happy. Of course it does, darling, Marcus said, patting my hand like I was a golden retriever. Under the table, my other hand clenched into a fist. Why don't you go powder your nose? The men need to discuss business. The German investors shifted uncomfortably. Even in their world of ruthless corporate takeovers, this level of dismissiveness raised eyebrows. But I played my part, standing with a demure nod. I'll be just a moment, I murmured. As I walked toward the restroom, I heard Marcus's voice again in German. See? Sweet, but simple. Perfect for now. Once I secure the 50 million, I'll upgrade to someone more appropriate for my new status. My heels clicked against the marble floor with measured precision. In the bathroom, I locked myself in a stall and pulled out my phone. 2 messages waited. The first was from my oldest brother, Klaus. Mother is watching the live feed. She says his German is atrocious. I smiled despite myself. My mother, Baroness Margaret von Hoffmann-Strauss, was a stickler for proper German. Marcus's business school German probably offended her more than his plans to abandon me. The second message was from my assistant, Yuki. The board meeting is set for Monday, 9 a.m. sharp. All evidence compiled and ready. Legal has approved everything. I typed a quick response. Proceed as planned. Then I checked my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked nothing like the Elena Magdalena who had built 3 successful companies by age 32. This Elena wore too much makeup, dressed in clothes chosen by someone else, and played the role of the perfect empty-headed trophy fiancé. But in 3 days, Marcus would learn exactly who he'd tried to use. I returned to find the appetizers had arrived, foie gras and truffle toast points, ordered by Marcus without asking anyone's preference. He was in full performance mode now, gesturing expansively as he explained his vision for next stream. The streaming platform market is oversaturated, my Uncle Friedrich was saying carefully. Your projections seem optimistic. That's because you're thinking old economy, Marcus countered, a hint of condescension creeping into his voice. This is about disruption, about capturing the youth market before they even know they want us. I wanted to laugh. Marcus's revolutionary streaming platform was actually a slightly modified version of existing technology, with worse UI and zero competitive advantage. I knew because I'd had my team analyze it, twice. And your user acquisition strategy? Asked Uncle Dieter, the youngest of my uncles at 53, who ran a venture capital firm in Frankfurt. Aggressive marketing, Marcus said confidently. We'll burn through initial capital to build market share, then monetize through premium subscriptions and data sales. Data sales? Werner's eyebrows rose slightly. You're planning to sell user data? It's standard practice. Marcus shrugged. Everyone does it. The users don't read the terms of service anyway. I watched Werner's expression harden almost imperceptibly. My godfather was many things. Shrewd, calculating, sometimes ruthless, but he despised companies that exploited consumer trust. His own daughter had been victimized by a data breach 3 years ago. This wasn't just business for him anymore. Interesting approach, Werner said neutrally. Marcus, oblivious to the shift in atmosphere, pressed on. With 50 million in funding, we'll dominate the market within 18 months. I guarantee returns of 300% within 3 years. Bold guarantee, observed Uncle Heinrich, the quietest of my uncles, who managed the family's private equity portfolio. What makes you so confident? Because I understand this market better than anyone, Marcus declared. I've lived and breathed tech for 15 years. I know what works. What he didn't mention was that his last 2 startups had failed spectacularly, or that Nextstream was already facing 3 lawsuits from former employees claiming wage theft, or that the proprietary technology he was pitching had been developed by a team he'd since fired without proper compensation. I knew all of this because I'd made it my business to know. And what about competition? Uncle Friedrich asked. StreamCore launched a similar platform last quarter with significant backing from Silicon Valley. Marcus waved dismissively. StreamCore is trash. Their interface is clunky, and their content deals are weak. We'll bury them within 6 months. I nearly choked on my water. StreamCore was one of my companies, one that I'd spent 2 years developing with a team of actual experts. It was profitable, growing, and actually did what Marcus claimed his platform would do. You seem very confident in your competitive assessment, Werner said slowly. Have you done thorough market research? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I don't need research, Marcus laughed. I have instinct. That's what separates the good entrepreneurs from the great ones. The Germans exchanged glances. In their world, in my world, comprehensive research was everything. Instinct without data was just expensive gambling. Shall we discuss the terms of investment? Marcus continued, pulling out a leather portfolio. I have the paperwork here. Standard equity split, with controlling interest remaining with me, of course. Of course, echoed Uncle Dieter dryly. And what role would you envision for your investors beyond capital provision? To be honest, Marcus leaned back confidently. I'd prefer you stay hands-off. I know what I'm doing. Too many voices complicate the vision. Another mark against him. Experienced investors knew that entrepreneurs who refused guidance rarely succeeded. But Marcus wasn't interested in success. Not really. He wanted the appearance of success, the lifestyle, the status. He wanted to be someone he fundamentally wasn't. I see, Werner said. And tell me, Marcus, what does Elena think of your business plan? The question hung in the air like a crystal about to shatter. Marcus laughed, not cruelly, but dismissively. Elena? She's wonderful for many things, but business isn't one of them. She helps me relax after long days at the office. That's her contribution. I'm sure she has thoughts, though, Werner pressed gently. A fresh perspective can be valuable. Werner, my friend, Marcus said with the condescension of someone explaining basic concepts to a child. Elena is many things, but analytical isn't one of them. She's artistic, creative. I handle the business side. He glanced at me with what he probably thought was affection. Isn't that right, darling? All eyes turned to me. I set down my water glass with deliberate care. This was the moment. I could continue the charade, or I could end it now, tonight, in front of everyone. But no, not yet. The full reveal needed to be perfect, documented, and most importantly, legal. I'd learned from watching my father's business dealings that revenge served cold wasn't just more satisfying, it was more effective. Marcus understands the business, I said softly, playing my role. I just try to support him. Marcus beamed like I'd given him a gift. The Germans remained impassive. How dedicated, Uncle Friedrich murmured in German. She supports you. Like I said, Marcus replied in his mediocre German. She's perfect for now. Sweet, agreeable, and her family's money doesn't hurt. He laughed at his own joke. About this family money, Werner said, switching back to English. Marcus, you've mentioned several times that Elena comes from wealth, yet she works as a party planner? I saw Marcus hesitate for just a moment. This was dangerous territory. He didn't actually know much about my family beyond what I'd told him, that my parents were comfortable, that I had a small trust fund, that I'd grown up in Europe. All true, technically. My parents were comfortable, if you counted 3 estates, a portfolio worth billions, and seats on a dozen international boards as comfortable. I did have a trust fund, one that could buy and sell Marcus's little startup 100 times over. Her family values independence, Marcus said carefully. They want her to make her own way. It's quaint. Quaint. My mother would love that description. Baroness Margaret von Hoffmann-Strauss, who sat on the boards of Mercedes-Benz and Deutsche Bank, who had once made a Swiss banking executive cry during a merger negotiation. She was many things, but quaint wasn't one of them. Very quaint, Werner agreed with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. And they approve of your engagement? Another pause. They will, once they meet me properly. Marcus said with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. Elena's kept me a bit of a secret, haven't you, darling? Wants to surprise them. Oh, they would be surprised, just not in the way he imagined. They'll love him, I said dutifully. The main course arrived. Wagyu beef that Marcus had ordered for the table without asking, naturally. The conversation shifted to safer topics: the state of European markets, recent tech acquisitions, the challenges of international business. Marcus held court, offering opinions on subjects he barely understood. I watched my uncles and Werner engage with him, their questions carefully calibrated to reveal the depths of his ignorance without making it obvious. It was masterful. And what about regulatory compliance? Uncle Heinrich asked at one point. The EU has strict data protection laws. We'll handle it, Marcus said with a wave of his hand. Hire some lawyers, check the boxes. It's not that complicated. GDPR compliance is quite complex, Uncle Heinrich pressed gently. The fines for violations can be substantial, up to 4% of global revenue. Then we'll make sure we don't get caught, Marcus joked. The table fell silent. I'm kidding, of course. Marcus backtracked quickly. We'll be fully compliant, obviously. But the damage was done. Werner's expression had gone from neutral to glacial. My godfather took data privacy seriously, not just because it was law, but because it was right. As dinner wound down, Marcus ordered another bottle of champagne. To new partnerships, he declared, raising his glass. To success. And to the beautiful woman who brought us together. They toasted. I smiled. Inside, I was counting down. 3 more days. After dinner, Marcus insisted on walking the investors out personally, leaving me to wait in the lobby. I watched through the glass doors as he shook hands enthusiastically, his body language screaming desperation despite his casual words. Did you enjoy your evening? I turned to find Werner standing beside me, somehow having separated from the group. Very much, I said quietly, still in character in case anyone was watching. Your fiancé is ambitious, Werner observed. He is. Does he know? Not yet. And Monday? Everything is ready. Werner nodded slowly, then said in rapid German, Your mother worries you're being too kind. She thinks you should have stopped this months ago. Where's the lesson in that? I replied in the same language. He needs to understand exactly what he tried to do. Fair enough. Werner's smile was shark-like. Your father would be proud. This level of calculated patience, it's very von Hofmann-Strauss. My father had passed away 2 years ago, a victim of aggressive pancreatic cancer that took him in 6 months. But he'd taught me everything about business, about strategy, about the long game. This was for him, in a way. He'd always said that the people who underestimated you were gifts. They revealed their weaknesses freely. Marcus had given me an entire inventory. I should go, Werner said, as Marcus started back toward the entrance. Remember, Monday, 9 a.m. Don't be late to your own execution. I smiled sweetly as Marcus reached me, slipping his arm around my waist possessively. That went perfectly, he declared as we waited for the valet to bring his car, a Tesla Model S he'd leased at a rate that should have been a mortgage payment. They're definitely interested. I could see it. You were wonderful, I said, because that's what he expected to hear. I know. He kissed my temple. And you were perfect too, darling. Just sitting there looking beautiful. That's all you needed to do. The valet pulled up with the car. Marcus tipped him $20. Too much. Another sign of someone trying to look wealthy rather than someone who actually was. As we drove through the city streets toward his apartment in the financial district, another expense he couldn't afford, Marcus talked endlessly about his plans. The office space he'd lease, the team he'd build, the conferences he'd attend, the respect he'd finally command. And we'll need to upgrade the engagement ring, he said suddenly, once the funding comes through. Something bigger, At least 3 carats. You deserve it. I looked down at the ring on my finger. A half-carat solitaire he'd presented 6 months ago. It was pretty in its simplicity, but Marcus was right that it wasn't impressive. What he didn't know was that I'd paid for it myself through a complicated shell company transaction, because his credit cards had been maxed out and he'd been too proud to admit it. "This one is fine," I said softly. No, Marcus insisted. "The wife of a successful CEO needs to look the part. We'll go to Tiffany's. Maybe Cartier." He glanced at me with what he probably thought was generosity. "You can pick whichever one you want." With my money, I thought. Because that was always the plan, wasn't it? Use my supposed family connections to get the funding, then use that funding to finance the lifestyle he wanted. I was never a partner in his mind, just a tool, a means to an end. We reached his building and Marcus handed his keys to the valet parking attendant, another luxury he couldn't afford, justified by his need to maintain appearances for investors. His apartment was sleek and modern, all glass and chrome and expensive furniture that belonged to people who actually had money. Marcus had decorated it like a magazine spread, down to the coffee table books he'd never read. "Nightcap?" he offered, heading to his bar cart, stocked with top-shelf liquor he'd charged to credit cards. "Just water for me," I said. "Come on, Elena. Live a little." He poured 2 glasses of scotch anyway, the good stuff he'd been saving. "We're celebrating." I took the glass because refusing would break character. Marcus settled onto the leather couch, Italian, custom-ordered, definitely not paid off, and pulled me down beside him. "You know what I love about you," he said, loosened by alcohol and arrogance. "You're so uncomplicated. No drama, no demands. You just let me be myself." "I like who you are," I lied. "That's because you're smart enough to recognize quality," he said without irony. "A lot of women wouldn't understand what I'm building. They'd want attention, time, commitment." He kissed my neck. "But you get it. You support me?" I closed my eyes, letting him mistake my silence for contentment. Inside, I was reviewing the evidence my team had compiled, the financial records showing how he'd been slowly draining funds from Nextstream for personal use, the emails to former business partners discussing how he'd found a sugar mama to finance his lifestyle, the text messages to his ex-girlfriend from just 2 weeks ago, talking about how he'd play the engagement game until the money was secure. Every conversation had been documented, every transaction traced, every lie cataloged and verified. Marcus had been sloppy because he'd assumed I was stupid. He'd left trails everywhere because he'd never imagined I would look. Men like him never did. "I should go," I said, pulling away gently. "Early morning tomorrow." "What's tomorrow?" Marcus asked, already reaching for his phone to check his calendar. "Just some party planning work," I said. "A corporate event. Nothing important." "Good. Hey, actually, while I have you, I need you to reach out to your family next week. Once the Germans confirm their investment, we should set up a meeting with your parents. I want to make a good impression." "Of course," I agreed. What a lovely idea that meeting would be. Marcus called me a car, on my credit card, linked to his phone, and kissed me goodbye at his door. "Love you, darling. Thanks for tonight. You were exactly what I needed." A prop. An accessory. A convenient source of funding wrapped in a pretty package. In the car, I finally let my smile drop. The driver met my eyes in the rearview mirror. "Rough night, miss?" "Not at all," I said, pulling out my phone. It was perfect. I had 3 new messages, one from Klaus. "Mother says she'll have the family jet ready Monday afternoon. She wants to be there for the finale." One from Yuki. All documents filed with the SEC. Next stream's financials will be flagged for audit by Tuesday. And one from Werner. The others want to invest, not in his company, in watching his face when he learns the truth. We've never been more entertained. I typed responses to each, then opened one final message thread. This one was with my attorney, Rebecca Chen, who specialized in business litigation and had been preparing our case for 3 months. "How strong is our position?" I asked. Her response was immediate. "Ironclad. Between the financial fraud, the breach of fiduciary duty, and the employment violations, he's looking at both civil and criminal liability. And that's before we get to the personal stuff, the fraudulent engagement, the attempted exploitation of your family connections. Elena, when this hits, it's going to be spectacular." "Good," I typed back. "He deserves spectacular." Because that was the thing Marcus had never understood. I didn't play party planner because I was too simple for real business. I played party planner because I wanted to see who he really was when he thought I couldn't hurt him. And now I knew. The car pulled up to my building, not the modest apartment Marcus thought I lived in, but a penthouse in a building my family owned. The doorman greeted me by name. "Good evening, Miss von Hoffmann-Strauss. Packages for you at the desk." I collected them, documents from my lawyers probably, and rode the elevator to the top floor. My apartment was nothing like Marcus's showroom. It was comfortable, lived in, filled with books and art I'd collected myself. Real art, not decorator pieces. I poured myself an actual scotch, 30-year-old single malt from a distillery my family had invested in, and settled onto my balcony. The city sparkled below, thousands of lights representing thousands of lives. Somewhere out there, Marcus was probably already texting someone about his successful dinner, bragging about how he'd secured funding from some naive Germans. He had no idea those naive Germans were about to teach him the most expensive lesson of his life. My phone rang. Klaus, calling via video. "There she is," my brother said when I answered. "The patient spider." "Hi, Klaus. Mother wants to know if you're sure about timing. She thinks you should wait until after the money transfers." "There won't be any money transferring," I said. "That was never real." "I know that," Klaus laughed. "But does he?" "He will soon." "Good." My brother's expression turned serious. "Elena, I know you want to handle this yourself, but if he's been as manipulative as we think—" "I'm fine," I interrupted. "This isn't about revenge, Klaus. It's about consequences. He needs to learn that people aren't tools. Father used to say the same thing, right before he destroyed someone's entire career." I smiled despite myself. "I learned from the best." "Yes, you did." Klaus paused. "Mother really does want to be there Monday. She's already bought a new suit specifically for watching you eviscerate him. Tell her the meeting starts at 9 a.m. sharp. She can watch from the conference room via video link." "She'll be thrilled." "Oh, and Aunt Helga sends her regards. She says if you need help disposing of the body, she knows people." I laughed. My family was nothing if not dramatic. "Tell Aunt Helga I'll handle it legally, thanks." After we hung up, I sat for a long time, thinking about the past 6 months, about the woman I'd pretended to be. Empty, dependent, grateful for Marcus's attention. About how many real women found themselves in similar positions, dismissed and underestimated by men who saw them as accessories. Monday wasn't just about Marcus. It was about every person who'd ever been used, manipulated, or underestimated. Every employee he'd cheated, every partner he'd betrayed, every woman he'd seen as a stepping stone. I finished my scotch and headed inside. Tomorrow was Friday. I had a party planning business to run, the legitimate one I'd built as a cover, which had somehow become profitable despite being a front. Then Saturday, I'd do final preparations. Sunday, I'd rest. And Monday? Monday, Marcus Bennett would learn exactly what happened when you tried to trade up from Elena Magdalena von Hoffmann-Strauss. The funny thing was, I'd actually loved him once. Not deeply, maybe, but genuinely. In those first few weeks before I'd created my cover story, I'd thought maybe this time would be different. Maybe this man would see me for who I really was and want me anyway. But I'd been wrong. Again. So I'd built my trap carefully, patiently, the way my father had taught me. And now it was time to spring it. I went to bed that night thinking about Monday morning, about walking into Nextstream's offices for the first time as myself, about the look on Marcus's face when he realized that the sweet, simple party planner he'd been stringing along was actually the person who held his entire future in her hands. About the moment he'd understand that in German, when someone says aufsteigen, to trade up, they should make sure the person they're trading up from doesn't speak German. And they definitely should make sure that person isn't related to the investors they need. Sleep came easily. After all, I had a big day ahead of me. Just 3 more days until Marcus Bennett learned the most important business lesson of his life. Never underestimate the woman pouring your wine. Friday morning arrived with crisp autumn sunshine streaming through my penthouse windows. I dressed carefully, not in the clothes Marcus liked, but in what I actually preferred. A tailored Armani suit in charcoal gray, my grandmother's pearls, and the Patek Philippe watch my father had given me when I completed my first successful acquisition. Today, I had a different kind of party to plan. My phone buzzed with Marcus's morning text. Miss you already. Lunch today? Need to discuss wedding venues? Time to start planning. Wedding venues. He'd proposed 6 months ago with my money and now wanted to plan a wedding with more of it. The audacity was almost impressive. Can't today. Big client meeting, I texted back. Tomorrow? You work too hard at that little business. Can't wait until you can quit. I stared at that message for a long moment. That little business had revenue of $43 million last year. But Marcus didn't know that. Marcus didn't know anything. See you tomorrow, I replied, then silenced my phone. Yuki arrived at 9 sharp, her arms full of folders and her tablet glowing with schedules. My assistant was a razor-sharp Harvard Law graduate who'd chosen to work for me instead of joining a prestigious firm. She said my projects were more interesting than corporate law. She was right. Timeline check, she announced, spreading documents across my dining table. SEC audit notification hits Nextstream's inbox at 8 a.m. Monday. Your uncle's withdrawal letter arrives at 8:15. Board meeting starts at 9 a.m. sharp. Marcus will be escorted to the conference room at 9:10. You make your entrance at 9:15. And the employees he fired? Already contacted. 17 former Nextstream employees have agreed to testify. Legal has their depositions ready. Oh, and the best part? Yuki's smile was wicked. 3 of them started their own company last month, with funding from Schmidt Industrial Holdings. Werner invested in them? Your godfather has a soft spot for people who've been screwed over by bad bosses. Their company is already outperforming Nextstream's projections. I felt a surge of pride. This was what business should be. Elevating talented people, not exploiting them. Media? I asked. On standby. Business Insider has the story ready to publish Monday at noon. Forbes wants an exclusive interview with you. And TechCrunch is doing a deep dive on fraudulent startup practices. Marcus is their lead example. He's going to be infamous. He's going to be unemployable, Yuki corrected, and possibly incarcerated, depending on how the DA's office handles the fraud charges. We spent the next 3 hours reviewing every detail. The evidence was overwhelming. Emails, bank records, recorded conversations, witness testimonies. Marcus had been careless because he'd thought he was untouchable, because I was too stupid to notice, because the Germans were too eager to care. Every assumption had been wrong. At noon, Klaus called again. Mother insists on catering Monday's meeting. She's sending German pastries and actual good coffee. She says if you're going to destroy a man's life, everyone should at least eat well. That's very thoughtful of her. She's also invited Aunt Helga, Uncle Peter, and Cousin Maximilian. It's becoming a family event. Klaus, this is a business meeting, not a circus. Too late. We're all coming. Father would have wanted to see this. My throat tightened at the mention of my father. He would have handled this differently. Faster. More brutally. But he'd also taught me that the best lessons were the ones people remembered forever. Marcus would remember this forever. Saturday was deliberately quiet. I spent the morning at my legitimate party planning office, reviewing actual client events. My team had grown to 15 people, and we specialized in high-end corporate functions. Ironically, we'd been asked to bid on Nextstream's holiday party before I'd met Marcus. I'd declined, of course. Even then, something about the company had felt wrong. Marcus called twice, both times to discuss wedding plans. He wanted a destination wedding, the Amalfi Coast maybe, or Santorini, somewhere expensive and photogenic, somewhere that would look impressive on Instagram. Whatever you want, darling, I said, because I knew there would be no wedding. That evening, Werner took me to dinner at a quiet German restaurant in the Old Quarter. We sat in a private room where we could speak freely. Are you certain about this? My godfather asked, cutting into his schnitzel. This level of exposure, it's not just Marcus who will face consequences. You'll be revealing yourself. No more anonymity. I know. Your father built those shell companies specifically to protect you, to let you operate without the weight of the family name. And I'm grateful for that, I said carefully. But hiding forever isn't the answer either. Besides, I'm not the one who did anything wrong. Werner studied me over his wineglass. No, but you're the one who set an elaborate trap and waited 6 months for it to spring. Some people will see that as cruel. Some people aren't the ones being used and mocked. Fair point. Werner smiled slightly. Your mother thinks you should run for parliament after this. She says Germany needs more people who understand long-term strategy. I laughed despite myself, one crisis at a time. Speaking of crisis, Werner leaned forward. Your Uncle Friedrich did some additional digging into Nextstream's finances. It's worse than we thought. Marcus hasn't just been stealing from the company. He's been running a shell game with vendor payments. Several small businesses are owed money that will probably never be recovered. My appetite vanished. How many? At least a dozen. Mostly minority-owned businesses, small contractors who couldn't afford lawyers to chase payment. The rage I'd been carefully controlling for 6 months flared hot and bright. This wasn't just about me anymore. Marcus had hurt real people, people whose livelihoods depended on getting paid for their work. Can we help them? Already arranged, Werner said smoothly. Schmidt Holdings will be acquiring Nextstream's assets after bankruptcy proceedings. We'll make sure the vendors get paid. It'll cost us, but it's the right thing to do. Thank you. Don't thank me. This was your mother's idea. She has very strong feelings about honor in business. We finished dinner discussing logistics, the bankruptcy proceedings, the criminal referrals, the civil suits from former employees. By the time Marcus was done, he'd be fighting legal battles for years. One more thing, Werner said as we parted ways. That comment he made about trading up, that was the moment your Uncle Friedrich decided to destroy him. He doesn't care about the money or the fraud. But disrespecting family? That's unforgivable. I hugged my godfather goodbye, grateful for a family that protected its own. Sunday, I barely heard from Marcus. One text in the morning. Busy day. Might have good news soon. I knew what the good news was. He thought the Germans were about to commit. He'd probably spent all weekend celebrating prematurely, possibly with the ex-girlfriend he was still texting. I spent the day in quiet preparation. I rehearsed what I'd say, how I'd stand, the expression I'd wear. This needed to be perfect. Not for drama's sake, but because Monday would set the tone for everything that came after. At 8 p.m., my mother called via video from Munich. Liebchen, she said, her aristocratic features softening. Are you ready? I think so. Your father would be very proud. This level of strategic patience, it's impressive. He taught me everything. Not everything. The compassion is all you. Your father would have simply crushed him on day one. She paused. I'm glad you're not like that. The world needs people who give others chances to be better, even if they waste them. Marcus wasted about 100 chances. Then he deserves what's coming. Her expression hardened. Destroy him, Elena, but do it with dignity. That's what separates us from people like him. Monday morning, I woke at 5 a.m., too energized to sleep. I dressed in my most powerful suit, midnight blue Dior, fitted perfectly. My hair was pulled back in a sleek bun, minimal jewelry except for my father's signet ring, which I wore on my right hand. I looked like exactly what I was, a von Hoffmann Strauss. The car picked me up at 7:30. My driver, Thomas, had been with our family for 20 years. He met my eyes in the mirror. Big day, Miss Elena? The biggest. Your father used to get this same look before important meetings. Like a general preparing for battle. Did he ever lose? Not once. We drove through morning traffic to Nextstream's offices in a converted warehouse building. Marcus had chosen the location because it looked startup authentic. Exposed brick, industrial lighting, open floor plans. He'd spent a fortune on the renovation. My uncle's cars were already parked outside. Werner's Mercedes, Friedrich's BMW, Dieter's Porsche. Even Klaus had flown in, his rental car sitting next to the others. The von Hoffmann Strauss family had come to witness justice. I entered through the main entrance for the first time. The receptionist looked up, confused. I'm sorry, we're not open yet. She's with us. Werner appeared from the elevator bank, resplendent in a three-piece suit. Miss von Hoffmann Strauss, welcome. The receptionist's eyes widened. She'd heard Marcus mention my name, Elena, but never my full name. Never with the proper weight behind it. Conference room B. Werner guided me to the elevator. Your mother is on video link. Klaus is already upstairs. The others are reviewing final documents. And Marcus? Still at home. He doesn't know about the 8 a.m. SEC notification yet. His lawyer has been trying to reach him for 30 minutes. The elevator doors opened to chaos. Nextstream's offices were already swarming with people. My family's legal team, accountants, several people I didn't recognize. Who are they? I asked. Representatives from the businesses Marcus defrauded, Werner explained. We invited them to witness this. They deserve to see justice. Klaus rushed over, pulling me into a fierce hug. There's our girl, ready to make history, ready to make things right. Same thing sometimes. He guided me toward the main conference room. Inside, one wall was dominated by a video screen showing my mother in Munich, Aunt Helga in Hamburg, and several other family members scattered across Europe. They'd all woken up early to watch. My daughter, my mother said warmly, you look like a CEO. I am a CEO, mother, 3 times over. Yes, but now everyone will know it. The conference table was set up like a courtroom, documents arranged in precise stacks, name placards for each participant, a separate table for Marcus, positioned so he'd face everyone. At 8:47, Marcus's lawyer called Yuki in a panic. We need to postpone the meeting, Mr. Croix. Bennett has just received some concerning notifications from federal regulators. No postponement, Yuki said crisply. Mr. Bennett agreed to this meeting last week. We'll see him at 9. At 8:52, Marcus himself called my phone. I let it ring through to voicemail. His message was frantic. Elena, something's wrong. The SEC is auditing Nextstream. The German investors pulled out. They sent a letter this morning saying they have concerns about management integrity. Can you call your family? Maybe they can help? Please, I need you. I deleted the message. At 8:58, Marcus burst through the conference room doors, wild-eyed and disheveled. He was wearing jeans and a wrinkled button-down. Clearly, he'd dressed in a hurry. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded. "Where's Elena?" Someone called and said there was an emergency board meeting. He stopped abruptly. The conference room was full of people he recognized. The 4 German investors sat along one side of the table, their expressions grave. Rebecca Chen, my attorney, sat at the head of the table with enough legal documents to build a small house. Several people he didn't know occupied the remaining seats. "Mr. Bennett," Rebecca said formally, "please sit down." "I don't understand. This is my company. Who authorized—" "Sit down, Marcus," Werner said, his voice cutting through the confusion like a blade. Marcus sat, his hands trembling. "Where's Elena? She was supposed to help me?" "She is helping you," Werner replied. "She's teaching you a valuable lesson." The door opened behind Marcus. He turned, expecting to see me as he knew me. Demure, uncertain. Ready to support him. Instead, he saw Elena Magdalena von Hoffmann-Strauss. I walked in like I owned the place, because through a complicated series of holdings I essentially did. Every head turned. Every person in the room stood except Marcus, who seemed frozen in his chair. "Good morning," I said in perfect German, then switched to English. "Shall we begin?" Marcus's face went through several colors, white to red to gray. "Elena? Why are you dressed like myself?" I took my seat at the head of the table directly across from him. "Because that's what this meeting is about, Marcus. The truth." "I don't understand." "Then let me explain." I nodded to Yuki, who pulled up the first presentation slide. "My name is Elena Magdalena von Hoffmann-Strauss. I hold 3 graduate degrees from Harvard, including an MBA. I'm the founder and CEO of 3 successful companies, including StreamCore, the streaming platform you claimed you could bury in 6 months." Marcus's mouth opened and closed silently. "I'm also," I continued, "the daughter of Baroness Margaret von Hoffmann-Strauss and the late Baron Friedrich von Hoffmann-Strauss. My family's holdings include significant positions in technology, manufacturing, banking, and venture capital across Europe and North America." "But you're a party planner," Marcus whispered. "I own a party planning company, yes. It grossed $43 million last year. But that's more of a hobby." I gestured to the Germans at the table. "Allow me to introduce my family. Friedrich von Hoffmann-Strauss, my uncle and CEO of Hoffmann Industrial Holdings. Dieter von Hoffmann-Strauss, my uncle and managing partner of Strauss Venture Capital. Heinrich von Hoffmann-Strauss, my uncle and director of the family's private equity portfolio. And Werner Schmidt, my godfather and CEO of Schmidt Industrial Holdings." Each man nodded as I said their names. Marcus looked like he might vomit. "For the past 6 months," I said calmly, "I've watched you, Marcus. I've documented your behavior, your fraud, your manipulation, your casual cruelty to people you thought couldn't fight back. Elena, I can explain." "You made one critical mistake," I continued, ignoring his interruption. "At dinner last Thursday, you spoke in German. You told my family that I was sweet, but not particularly smart. You said that once you secured funding, you would trade up to someone more appropriate for your new status." The color drained from Marcus's face completely. "The problem, Marcus, is that German is my first language. I understood every word. And so did my family." "I was joking," Marcus said desperately. "It was just Locker room talk, I didn't mean. You meant every word, Friedrich interjected coldly. We have recordings of similar conversations. You've been planning to leave Elena since before you proposed. You saw her as a temporary funding source. That's not. Let me share what else we discovered, I said. Rebecca began distributing documents. You've stolen approximately $400,000 from Nextstream for personal expenses. You've failed to pay 17 contractors, most of them minority-owned small businesses. You've violated employment law in the termination of 23 employees. You've misrepresented your company's technology to investors, technology you don't actually own because you failed to compensate the developers who created it. With each accusation, I slid a stack of evidence across the table: bank records, emails, recorded phone calls, witness statements. Marcus's hands shook as he looked through the documents. You set me up. This whole thing was a setup. No, Marcus. I gave you 6 months to be a decent person. You failed spectacularly. You're a manipulative bitch, he snarled, his mask finally cracking completely. You pretended to be someone you weren't. You lied about everything. I omitted information, I corrected. Everything I told you was technically true. I do work in party planning. I did grow up in Europe. My family does have money. You made assumptions, wrong ones. This is entrapment. This is consequences, Rebecca interjected. Miss von Hoffmann-Strauss has broken no laws. You, however, have broken several. She slid another document across the table. This is a referral to the district attorney's office regarding multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. This one is a notice of civil litigation from 23 former employees. This one is from the SEC regarding your financial misrepresentations. And this, she placed a final document in front of him, is a notice of bankruptcy proceedings. Nextstream Technologies is insolvent. The company will be liquidated and assets will be sold to pay creditors. You can't do this, Marcus said, but his voice had lost its fight. We already have, Werner said simply. Schmidt Holdings will acquire Nextstream's technology at bankruptcy auction. We'll ensure the small businesses you defrauded receive payment. Your former employees will receive their back wages and severance. And you, Mr. Bennett, will receive exactly what you deserve. Nothing. Marcus turned to me, his eyes desperate. Elena, please. We were going to get married. You loved me. I thought I did, I admitted. For about 3 weeks, before you showed me who you really were. After that, I loved the lesson I could teach you. What lesson? He spat bitterly. That people aren't tools. That dismissing someone as stupid because they don't advertise their intelligence is dangerous. That underestimating women, employees, contractors, anyone you see as beneath you, has consequences. I stood, signaling the meeting was ending. You're going to face legal consequences for your actions, Marcus, criminal and civil. That part is out of my hands now, but you're also going to face something worse. The knowledge that you had something real, someone who might have actually helped you if you'd been honest, and you threw it away because you thought you deserved better. I do deserve better, Marcus said, but the words were hollow. No, I said quietly. You deserve exactly this. Security arrived to escort Marcus out. He left still protesting, still claiming victimhood, still unable to understand that he'd architected his own destruction. After he was gone, the conference room erupted. My mother's video screen filled with applause. Klaus pulled me into another hug. Werner shook my hand with something like paternal pride. Beautifully done, Friedrich said. Your father would have been proud. The contractors who weren't paid, I said, make sure they're first in line for restitution. Already arranged, Dieter assured me. They'll have their money by the end of the week. The former Nextstream employees approached cautiously. A young woman with bright purple hair spoke first. Miss von Hoffmann-Strauss, I'm Sarah Chen. I was Marcus's lead developer until he fired me for asking about delayed wages. I remember reading your file, I said. You built most of Nextstream's core technology. And he took credit for all of it. Sarah's eyes were wet. I thought I'd never get justice. Thank you. One by one, the others came forward. Stories of unpaid wages, stolen ideas, workplace bullying. Each one broke my heart a little more. You're all brilliant, I told them, and you all deserve better. If you're looking for new opportunities, StreamCore is hiring. So are several of my family's other companies. They left with renewed hope. It wasn't just about destroying Marcus. It was about elevating the people he'd tried to destroy. By noon, the story had broken. Business Insider published first. Tech CEO caught in elaborate fraud scheme. Fiancé turns out to be European business heiress. Forbes followed with, meet Elena von Hoffmann-Strauss, the secret CEO who took down her fraudulent fiancé. My phone exploded with interview requests, business inquiries, and surprisingly, thank you messages from women who'd been in similar situations. My story resonated because it wasn't unique. It was just uncommon for the woman to have the resources to fight back. That evening, I sat in my penthouse with Klaus, both of us exhausted but satisfied. So what now? My brother asked. Back to anonymity? No, I said. Father built those shell companies to protect me, but maybe it's time I didn't need protection. Maybe it's time I operated in the open. Mother will be thrilled. She's already planning your welcome back into society. There's a charity gala next month. Klaus, I interrupted. I'm not moving back to Munich. My life is here. Running party planning companies? Running businesses that treat people with dignity. Making sure what happened to those employees never happens again. Klaus smiled. So you're keeping the party planning cover? It's not a cover anymore. It's legitimate. And it's mine. We drank to that. Good German beer, not Marcus's pretentious Scotch. 3 months later, the legal proceedings were still ongoing, but the outcome was certain. Marcus faced years of litigation and possible prison time. Nextstream's assets had been acquired by Werner's company, and the employees had been paid in full. I'd given interviews about business ethics, about the importance of treating people with respect, about the dangers of startup culture that valued appearance over substance. My story had sparked conversations about fraud, about workplace abuse, about the many ways people in power exploited those without it. And I'd taken StreamCore public in a highly successful IPO, making several of my former employees millionaires in the process. The engagement ring Marcus had given me, the one I'd paid for myself, I had melted down and turned into 23 small pendants. I sent one to each former Nextstream employee with a note. Your worth was never determined by someone who couldn't see it. I never heard from Marcus again. The last I knew, he was working in his father's insurance office in Nebraska, making $40,000 a year and living in a studio apartment. He'd wanted to trade up. Instead, he'd lost everything. As for me, I was finally living as myself. No more disguises, no more tests. Just Elena Magdalena von Hoffmann-Strauss, CEO, businesswoman, and the woman who'd taught one arrogant man that some people weren't meant to be traded. They were meant to be treasured. And if you weren't smart enough to know the difference, well, as my father always said, expensive lessons tend to be the most memorable. Marcus would never forget this one. Neither would I. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.